Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Manhattan GMAT Study Hall for September 22nd. So today's theme is the use of critical reasoning problems with numbers and statistics in them. So verbal problems, but a special type of verbal problem that requires a little bit more in the way of quantitative reasoning. So they're not going to be the same type of critical reasoning problem. As you'll see, some are conclusion problems, some are weakened problems. There's many different types, but we'll try to draw some general conclusions about how to deal with these sorts of things in general and how you should be thinking about numerical quantities and statements when you see them in verbal problems. Okay, but as you know, if you are a veteran of these study halls, you do have to, we do have to go through a few preliminaries before we get started, so let's get through those somewhat quickly here. The usual warnings: please don't submit problems that are too general, like all of geometry or how do I do problems faster. Some people especially are still doing this. Don't submit problems that are too specific. Please post these kinds of problems on the forums, ladies and gentlemen, not here. If you have one question to ask about in one or even a couple of choices, then please don't post that here. Please post that on the forum. And then finally, personal issues. In the last couple of weeks, we've had students ask us to, remember that this is a study hall that is watched by hundreds, if not thousands of people. So we've had a couple of requests of, can you look at my assessment reports and tell me about my personal weaknesses? There is a general questions folder for that. The purpose of the general questions folder on the forum is to treat such things, to talk about personal strengths, weaknesses, study plan, and so on. But in a study hall that's eventually going to be watched by hundreds or even thousands of people, not an appropriate topic. So again, intermediate depth. If you give us a specific problem, please tie the specific problem into something that is more general. Please, please, please. Okay. Finally, no official guide problems. Again, we will reject them because GMAT has officially asked us to reject official guide problems in these forums. Mostly because the official guide is a paid source, and so they don't really want to see the questions distributed for free. GMAT Prep is fine. GMAT Prep is a free product, so we can share those problems. However, OG problems not okay. Just to recap, a couple of the more important points here. Please do not submit problems from the official guide. Here's an example of a submission with lots of OG problems in it. Unfortunately, we can't do that. This is a submission from the last couple of weeks. Again, this is an example of why we have the forums. So this student, if you are one of the people watching, the person who submitted this, make sure you put it on the forum, please. This is a person who is just asking about one of the divisibility and primes problems from the MGMAT practice test. Notice in this submission there's no connection to any sort of larger theme. In fact, it's just a question about a couple of answer choices to one data sufficiency problem. So this is not the kind of thing that should be in the study hall because it's a single topic that doesn't connect to anything else. So forums, please, with things like this. And finally, guys, there's not usually too much of this, but there's been an uptick of this in the last couple of weeks. But please don't send submissions that are worded in a way that is rude or demanding. For instance, this is from the last couple of weeks. We have one student who actually says, "I expect a reply from you." That's not professionally okay. You can't, when you're a client, you can't really tell the professional, I expect you to do this. especially when it's a free service like the study hall here. I understand that what may be happening here is a language barrier. I mean, maybe the person who wrote these words is just not translating things from his or her native language in a way that's acceptable in terms of etiquette. I mean, occasionally that does happen, that things are lost in translation or whatnot. But the point that I want to emphasize about this is that even if that is what is happening, it's still not okay, especially in terms of pursuing a career in something like business, where there is just so much that has to do with etiquette and so much is written communication. So, I mean, my point here is that, you know, if this is actually what you meant, then that's not so good. But even if it wasn't, even if this was an accident and you just meant to write something like, you know, I hope you can do this, still important that you know, wherever you get the feedback from, whether it's an native English-speaking friend, or, you know, just have someone look over a few of your emails and look at the style of your writing. Because, guys, business depends so much on written communication these days that even if this is an accident, it is still something that has to be fixed. So there's been a few, it's not just this one. I mean, I cut and pasted this part of the picture just to demonstrate what I'm talking about here, but it's not good. So it's got to be fixed. Either fixing the general way of looking, if it was on purpose, then you got to fix the general way you look at this kind of communication. Or if it was an accident, then someone's got to, you know, help you with a little bit of learning about that kind of thing, because it matters. It matters a lot, the way that certain words come across weirdly a lot. Okay. Finally, we've done about 40 study hall sessions, give or take a few. So 40 sessions is a lot. Therefore, what that means, among other things, is that we have already covered a lot of topics. So, hence, it is a very high chance that you are submitting a topic that has already been covered. So, please, if you submit something that has already been covered, still okay, as long as you are asking for some sort of new aspect of that topic that has not already been treated in the previous session. So for instance, we've done a lot of critical reasoning before, but today's students have asked about numerical problems, so that's new. Also, if you see any theme that's here, but there's a specific aspect of it that you haven't seen treated, then that's also legitimate. Or just if there's a topic that's really huge and a major topic and you've got enough fresh problems that you can suggest, then you can submit that as well. But please don't just give me a topic that we've already covered for that reason. We don't want to be redundant here. Okay, so those are the rules. If you're an old-timer here, you definitely know these rules by this point. This is not new, but please give me the smiley face icon over there on the left if these rules are understood. Okay. So again, for those of you who are just getting here, today's topic is critical reasoning problems with numerical or statistical statements in them. So we're going to go ahead and get started on these and see what kinds of general ideas we can draw from them. Also note, again, if you're an old-timer here, you already know this, but there are answer buttons. As of now, there will be. Okay, there are now answer buttons on your left that look like that. When we put problems up on the board, please use these buttons to answer the problem, and please do not answer the question in the text box. For a couple of reasons. Number one, if you've seen these study halls before, you'll know there's a statistical aggregator that makes it'll combine your responses to make a cute little graph. But also, number two, if you answer in the text box, then everybody else will see that answer as soon as it goes up. And so that's not great in terms of people's individual efforts to solve the problem. So please use the answer buttons to answer the questions. Okay, any questions before we get started? Please go ahead and type them in the text box. Otherwise, we will get slamming here. Okay, also, yeah, don't click your answer more than once, because if you do, then if you click the same answer twice, then the second click will undo your first click, and then there will be nothing. So by all means, if you need to change your answer, then you can click once on the new answer. But if you click twice or any even number of times, then you will be deleting your answer by doing so. Okay, so anybody who's used to double-clicking things, this is not that kind of thing. Any questions? Else, let's go ahead and get started. So here's a problem. I'll put a timer on the board. There you go. Okay, everybody please indicate an answer. I think we got one from, I think only Landry has not given an answer so far. Okay, Landry, if you're here. Remember, everybody, this is the GMAT. GMAT is a test on which you have to answer the problem, and there is no such thing as skipping or leaving blank. So even if you are not sure, please make sure you answer the problem. Also, unless otherwise noted, the problems in this session are going to be from the GMAT prep software. So this one is a GMAT prep problem. Okay, let's talk about this problem. In the United States, of the people who moved from one state to another when they retired, oh, by the way, statistics here are your class statistics. So there's a split, mostly C and D, but a few odd other answers here and there too. Okay, of the people who moved from one state to another when they retired, the percentage who moved to Florida has decreased by 3 percentage points over the past 10 years. Since many local businesses in Florida cater to retirees, this decline is likely to have a noticeable negative economic effect. on these businesses. Okay, so notice that this problem features a percentage. Does anybody have any sort of default thoughts that they think upon seeing a percentage in a critical reasoning problem? Text box if you do. Does anybody have anything that they think about as soon as they see that? Okay. A couple of you are saying stuff. Percent is used to trick us. Well, that is, I mean, not really in terms of tricks. What you will see, actually one thing that's very nice about this is that, let me, we'll come back to this problem in a second, but the question at hand right now is, what do you think when you see percentages in a critical reasoning problem? So here's a couple of responses. One student wrote this in the text box. One thing that's nice about this test is that this is not really ever true. There are problems, so one, I mean, this may not be your favorite test in the world, but one very nice aspect of this test is that it generally doesn't have trick questions. It's nice. We like that. I mean, there are problems on which they are basically testing to see whether you are paying attention to certain key aspects. But that's not the same as the trick question. In other words, they're not going to be like, haha, got you, that was a trick. They're not going to get you with wordings or things like that. So, okay. Yeah, a couple of you are starting to nail what I'm getting at here, though, which is beware of answer choices that talk of raw numbers. I think that's what relativity means when someone wrote that, versus real numbers. So, yeah. These three people have gotten, the ones I'm going to put on the board right now, have are at least on the wavelength that I'm trying to get at here. The other commenters are not necessarily wrong, but these three comments reflect what I'm trying to get at here, which is watch it for the fact that percentages are not real numbers. This is the deal here. Percentages are not numbers. So they do like to highlight, because, okay, here's the story. What they like to do in these problems is test concepts that can be tested without making you do a lot of math. So because at the end of the day, remember, this is the verbal section. This is not the math section, and so they don't want to give problems that are incredibly heavy on the math. So they want to give you problems that don't require extensive calculation, if they require any calculation at all. So they want to give you problems that test the concepts behind the math. So this is one example of such a concept. Percentages are not numbers, and therefore a percent, I mean, if a percentage of something goes up, then that result doesn't necessarily signify an absolute increase in the quantity itself. And then same goes for decreases. So this is what you should be aware of whenever you see a percentage in a critical reasoning problem. You should be thinking to yourself, hey, percentages are not numbers, so what the heck? So let's look at this. The percentage has gone down by 3 percentage points. When you see that kind of thing, it should definitely bring to mind this whole issue of, but okay, I don't know if the actual number of people has gone down. So what about the actual number of retirees? Because it's just a percentage. So what we need here is a little bit more information about the baseline number here. So if the percentage has gone down by 3%, but the baseline population has increased by much more than that, then there could still be a big uptick even despite that percentage decrease. So again, this will not be always what is being tested, because nothing will ever be always. I mean, they might sometimes give you a problem with percentages that is really about percentages. But in this case, still worth looking at. So what they're talking about is the negative economic effect on businesses would be a factor of the number of retirees. Because that can't reasonably be a percentage of total thing. This is going to be a function of how many retirees there are to patronize these businesses. So that's a function of the number of people. So to weaken this argument, you are probably going to capitalize on the discrepancy between these percentages and these numbers, because they haven't given you any data about the businesses. I mean, there could be several other ways that you could theoretically weaken an argument like this one. I mean, there could be some aspect of these businesses themselves, like they're modernizing or they're getting to learn their client base better or whatever, like something that could help them cope with an actual decrease in population, but that's not mentioned. So that leaves us with this whole percentage thing. So that is going to give you this. This means you've got a total increase in the total baseline population. So if D is true, then that means that you have a lot bigger people. You have a lot bigger number of people. So if that statement is true, then our smaller percentage most likely represents a larger absolute number of people. Make sure you know also that I think one thing that a couple people have misinterpreted in this problem, and I can see how you might, so watch out for it. But one thing that a couple of people have misinterpreted in this problem is the word another state here. Like, I think some people have thought that that meant a state other than Florida. Not what that means, but I can kind of see how people might think that. But notice the correspondence between these words and these words. So that means the total number of people who moved from any state to any other state that was not that first state. That doesn't mean other than Florida. That means people who moved states has gone up. So, okay, there's a comment that says the number has gone down, but that's the point. We don't know that the number, maybe I'm misinterpreting the comment, but we don't know that the number has gone down. We know that the percent of retirees. I mean, if you want, okay, if you guys want, you can slap some numbers on these and see if that makes more sense. So, I mean, the point about these problems is not to think in terms of numbers. So, the point in terms of these problems is to think conceptually in terms of what variables interact with what other variables. Because it's, at the end of the day, it's a critical reasoning problem, not a math problem. But if you have to, you can slap some numbers on these things to try to build some understanding. So the idea here is that the percent moving to Florida has gone down, but we don't have any information about the original number. Text box people, please don't send messages twice. Thank you very much. We will get to them. So, lower percentage could mean higher number. Could. So there you go. I mean, if you want, so the deal here is if necessary, you can plug numbers. But having to plug numbers here is not a good thing. If you have to plug numbers on a problem like this, that probably indicates that you should put a little effort into developing the conceptual reasoning that's necessary. So if you find that you have to plug numbers, then you should put effort into developing the conceptual approach. So, for instance, that might help you learn how these kinds of numbers work. So, if you have 1 million retirees, and then 10% move to Florida, then that would be 100,000. But then if you have 2 million retirees, the problem stipulates 3% less. So if only 7% move to Florida, then that would be 140,000. So still great many more retirees. That's kind of the idea here. I mean, you shouldn't have to plug numbers here to figure this kind of stuff out, but if plugging these kinds of numbers will help you generalize and help you learn how these kinds of quantities work, then there you go. Okay, there's like 1 million messages in the text box, so let me see what people are saying here. The question. Okay, a couple people are asking about answer C. Answer C is irrelevant because it doesn't have anything to do with the argument. The argument is just about businesses that cater to retirees. So the argument is concerned only with the cash flow and profits of businesses dealing with retirees. So therefore, comparisons to other kinds of businesses are irrelevant. I mean, I'll make an analogy here. As usual, the best way to understand critical reasoning is by analogy. So we'll try that here. But since many local businesses cater to retirees, like when they say these businesses, they're only talking about the businesses that cater to retirees. That's what these businesses signifies. What are the businesses that we are already talking about? So this is a comparison with other businesses that cater to tourists, and we don't care because that's not the material of the argument. So I mean, as an analogy of choice C, let's say I have an argument that says, you know, town X has fewer teenagers, and teenagers are the prime customers at movie theaters. Town X has a lower percentage of teenagers now. Therefore, town X movie theaters are going to suffer. So this has the same problem as the previous argument does, but choice C is kind of like saying that town X has more grocery stores than movie theaters. It just doesn't have anything to say. I mean, it just doesn't have anything to do with the argument. Because fine, there might be more grocery stores, but so what? I mean, a grocery store is not an alternative to a theater, so that's not the point. Like, if these were other, like, if this kind of thing was some other type of business that would siphon business away from these businesses, then sure. But only that. Okay, let's see. There's still a whole text box full of stuff. Okay, total number of people moved to another state. I'm not understanding everything that people are typing here, but let's see. So here's the problem again, fresh screen. There's a couple of comments that I don't really understand what people are saying, but I will try. Like, I'm not really understanding what this means. Total number of people moved to, yeah, I'm not sure what this means. Total number of people may still happen. Maybe you could explain that a little bit more. And then here's a comment that, okay, this comment is important to respond to in the sense that the correct answer to this problem was D. I'm not sure if you were late to the session or not. D like dog. The whole point of critical reasoning, especially strength and weaken problems, is that they will not spell stuff out for you. So, I mean, they're not going to give you like super direct evidence of stuff, because the point is for you to see these relationships. So, I mean, this comment suggests a lack of fundamental understanding of the genre of this problem here. So, two comments on this thing. First of all, the problems are strength and this problem is strength and weaken. It's not. I mean, make sure you know that strength and weaken is strength and weaken. And in particular, it's not confirm and destroy. Like, you don't have to absolutely prove the argument if you strengthen, and you don't have to destroy the argument in order to weaken it. These problems are not that extreme. So you don't have to prove that the argument is worthless. You just have to give a factor that works against the argument. So in choice D, you have an increasing baseline, which in line with this decreasing percentage will work against it. That's the point. So yes, you are absolutely correct that it doesn't spell out this point, and that's the deal. That's what this is all about. It's not going to spell things out. It's going to give you factors that may work, that will reasonably work against the argument without having to spell all of this out, because that's the whole point of what these kinds of problems are trying to measure. So, yeah. So in line with that comment, like you don't have to have proof. If you, I mean, you'll notice this. If you go through strength and weaken problems and look for things that absolutely confirm or absolutely destroy the argument, you will find that you simply can't solve any of the problems because that's how they work. Okay, finally, I know we're sick of this problem, but one more comment to respond to here, which is this one. This is a strength and weaken question. And there's a question in the text box about whether the answer is out of scope or not. Yes, the answer is out of scope, but it will. But so is D. I mean, on strength and weaken questions, the correct answer, C is not the correct answer, but the correct answer must be out of scope in at least some way. In other words, it can't be contained within the argument already. Because remember, you're trying to make an argument stronger or weaker. You can't make an argument stronger or weaker by simply reiterating what's already there. So, I mean, yeah, these things are both outside the original scope. I mean, the total number is also outside the original scope because it just talks about percentages. But that's the whole point. And, oh, this is not a great transcription. This should say following. But the point is, if you see which of the following, if true, then the answer must introduce new information. It has to. Otherwise, it can't it can't serve its purpose. The reason they're telling you if true is so that you know that you are allowed to introduce these new things into your argument. Okay, so if anybody has any questions that have not been addressed here, please put them in the box. Otherwise, we will move on to another problem. All right, let's look at this one right here. Okay, that's not the one. Let's try that one. Okay, I'll put a couple minutes up there. Enjoy. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's pick something. That's the 2-minute mark. So if you remember, this is the GMAT. This is a test on which you must pick an answer to the question that's in front of you. You can't skip. You can't leave questions blank. Those are not options. Someone says we should aim to answer this in less than 1:20. 1:20 is awfully fast. I'm not sure where you got that figure from, but the 1:20 sounds like the average figure for sentence correction problems, but not, number one, that doesn't sound like an accurate number for critical reasoning. And number two, that you remember that these problems are going to depend on how many words are on the screen. Okay, someone says that's the LSAT. Yeah, guys, that's the danger of using materials from the wrong test. It depends on how many words are on the screen. Like, if the problem is really, really, really short and small and self-contained, then you can answer it quicker. So, like, this problem has got a lot more words than the previous problem did, both in the prompt and in the answer choices. So, you know, you can take a little bit longer. But it's definitely a mistake to think that you should take the same amount of time on every problem. Because if there are more words, then you should allow yourself more time. If there are fewer words, then less time. Okay, so let's take a look. A lot of you guys still don't have answers to this problem yet. There's no answer from Hema, Jesse, Lynn, Mimi or Sarah or Star or Vasan. So guys, make sure you answer the problem, because on the GMAT you have to. Okay, so let's look. Here are your class statistics. Again, there are quite a few non-responses to the problem, so keeping in mind that. So, I mean, we have 7 non-responses, which sort of cheapens what's going on here. But, guys, make sure you answer the problem. Okay, so in Cravonia, the average salary for jobs requiring a college degree has always been higher than the average salary for jobs that do not require such a degree. So, over the past few years, the number of Cravonians enrolled has been growing steadily. Therefore, the number of Cravonians entering the job market who have at least the qualification of a college degree will be significantly higher. So, I mean, there's a lot of words here, but make sure that you, when a problem has statistics, make sure you try to boil it down to the essentials. Because, I mean, having a combination, I mean, statistics are fine, and having words is fine, but having a combination of statistics and like tons and tons and tons of unnecessary verbiage is problematic. So what's going on here is the conclusion of this argument is the number of Cravonians who have at least a college degree will grow. So this is only an argument. That means the first statement is really just a background statement. The average salary part, just background. So that's basically not even relevant to the argument, because that has nothing to do with the number of people who have degrees. So the argument is basically just more people are enrolled in college, therefore the number of people who graduate with degrees is going to be higher. And you're trying to weaken this connection. So again, the conclusion of the argument is there will be more college graduates. That's basically what it says. I mean, entering the job market is not something we really have to worry about, because that's by definition what college graduates do, is they enter the job market. So, how about that? But the premise of this argument is that the number of students enrolled has been going up. So there are more enrolled college students right now. There are currently more students enrolled in college. And because it's a weekend question, what we have to do is figure out some sort of disconnect between these two statistics. So let's look and see if we can figure something like that. So, I mean, we need some sort of break point between enrolled students and graduates. So there's a couple of ways that you might do that. I mean, one, can anybody come up with their own weakener to this problem that would be different from what's in the correct answer text box? Like, how else could you disconnect the number of enrolled students from the number of graduates? Yeah, a couple of you are getting at another thing that we could do. Well, we could just have people not graduating. So, as an example, if a lower percent graduate, then there may not be more graduates. So, yeah. Most of you are talking about dropouts. Good. There you go. A couple people are getting at things that are not the point. Let me address those really quick. A couple people are talking about finding jobs before starting school. That's still entering the job market. Like if you are, if you are graduating from school, then there's that. But you could. I mean, if you have people for whatever reason don't have to be in the job market, like if you get people who, a better example along the same lines would be if you had people getting degrees but not going into the job market. I don't know why they would do that, but let's say you had a huge increase of people. Yeah, that could work if they went to graduate school afterwards. That would work. Or if you had a big increase in the number of people getting degrees and then going to be homemakers or something like that. So that could work. And then you've got someone else said might be that the number of available jobs were more than candidates. That doesn't matter, actually. This argument has nothing to do with how many jobs there are. So we don't care. Like the argument is just about how many people will be in the labor force. It's not about the number of jobs. So, okay. Graduates that leave the country. Well, let's see. The word "the job market" here is ambiguous. So, I mean, we don't know if it's the Crevonian job market or not. So, even if they move to another country, they probably still count as entering the job market. It's just the global job market. Okay, so back to the point here. We need something that directly influences the relationship between people enrolled in college and eventual college graduates. So, the only choice here that does that is D, B like boy. What B like boy does is saying that, people take longer to graduate from college. So if people are staying longer, then there will be more enrollees per graduate. I mean, for instance, if people take 4 years to finish college, then about 25% of people who are undergrads are going to be graduating that year. But if people suddenly start taking 5 years, then what that means is that only 20% of people are going to be graduating. And so you could have more people on campus and still have the same or even a smaller number of graduates if that's happening. So, yeah, you could have dropouts. Dropouts would also be a correct answer to this problem, but there's no choice about dropouts. And then, or people are just, what they're doing in B is people are staying enrolled for more years, and so that's skewing the percentage of graduates. Notice that the other choices just don't treat the issue here. So if you picked another answer to this problem, then what that means is that you're not doing this. You're not boiling it down to the essentials of the problem. Instead, what you're doing is you're kind of getting lost. I mean, one of the biggest dangers of these problems is getting lost in a train of thought. Like, you can't do this thing where A is related to B and B is related to C and C is related to D, but by the time you get to A and D, there's no relationship. I mean, it's easy for that to happen. Don't let it happen. Make sure you stick to the point. In this case, the point that you want to stick to is what's the distinction between people enrolled and people who graduate. So earnings don't affect this argument, so A is wrong. The percentage of people in the country as a whole doesn't matter. It just matters if there's more of them. This is a question about absolute numbers. It's not a question about the percentage as a whole. So the principle we had before, that percentages are not numbers, can be used again to prove that that C is irrelevant. D, it doesn't really matter what the requirements of the job are, because the argument is not about jobs. The argument is about who is entering the labor market and with what degrees. It's not what kind of jobs will they take. And then E is also not relevant because, again, we're not talking about filling jobs. We are just talking about who is entering the market with what. And the argument does not deal at all with what they do once they are in that market. So stay on topic. So when we say boil down to the essentials, this accomplishes two things. The first thing that it does is it simplifies what you have to deal with. So simplify the material, but also stay on point. I mean, yes, you have to have an answer that is outside the original scope, but it also has to deal with the relatively narrow range of topics that are actually in there. So, any questions about this? Okay, so I mean, again, there's a lot of words. When there are a lot of words, the challenge is to not go crazy and become distracted. All right, let's try this problem here. Go for it. Okay, we are out of time here. Let's go ahead and try to answer this problem, please. So if you have not answered yet, if you are Anirada or Sarah or Vasant, then please try to answer the problem. So I'll give you 10 more seconds to do that. Okay, let's look. So again, remember what you want to do here is boil down the argument to what are its essentials, like what is actually going on in this argument, what needs to be treated, in other words. So, and once you have the argument boiled down to essentials, you want to make sure that you stay on topic, because most incorrect answers are going to be things that just don't have anything to do with the topic. So, all right. Okay. So, Vasant got it. No problem. An airplane manufacturer implemented a program with the well-publicized goal of reducing half. The goal was to reduce by half. Pablo, I'll get your question in a little bit. The total yearly amount of hazardous waste generated by its passenger jet division. When the program began in 1994, it was 90 pounds per production worker. And last time it was 40 pounds per production worker. And then, I mean, notice all the words here. Charges that the program has not met its goal are false. What that means, in short, is that the program has actually met its goal. So, I mean, charges that it has not met its goal are false. Therefore, it's met its goal. So the essentials of this argument are, well, the goal was to cut the absolute amount of waste by 50%. But we have a data point. The only data point we have is that the amount of waste per worker has gone down by over half. Therefore, the conclusion is that we have met the goal. Okay, so once you get it down to these essentials, it's a lot like the problem we saw earlier with retirees in Florida, where you have two statistics that don't comport with each other, but the argument is trying to treat them as if they do. So you have a goal in absolute terms, but then you have a data point that is not in absolute terms. So these, as same thing like percentages and numbers, like percents and numbers, these statistics don't comport with each other. So what you need to do is you need to figure out what the argument is assuming. So, and think about what kind of statistics would break this relationship. Like, this is pounds per production worker. Like, one way that this percentage could have gone down is if the pounds have actually gone down by that much. But another way that the pounds per worker could decrease in this sort of way is simply if the number of workers has gone up. So there's two ways that this data point may have been achieved. This could come from, number one, an actual decrease in pounds. Or it could also come from an increase in the number of workers. Because I mean, you could have that reduction come entirely from just having twice as many employees. Or in a worst case scenario, you could even have more waste, but you would have so many more employees that the per worker quantity would go down. So it's a lot like dealing with a percentage versus dealing with a number. You have to realize when two quantities are in fact different, you want to make that realization that, hey, they're actually different. So the assumption is that it's not number two, because we're saying that our goal, which is a decrease in pure pounds, has been met, which means we're basically just assuming that it's not number two. So that means E. Okay, so most of you picked E. Here are the, I didn't put the statistics on the board earlier, so here they are. We have a strong majority of E's here. So does anybody have any questions about answers that are not E? I see a couple people typing. While people are typing, I'll address this question of Pablo's here. The question is, can the Boyle to essentials be applied to all types of critical reasoning? Not all types, but quite a few types. The question is that. We'll put the problem back on the screen in a second. Oh, sorry, LBS is an abbreviation for pounds. It's kind of like, I mean, this units of measure sometimes have weird abbreviations like that. LBS is pounds. OZ can be ounces. It's kind of strange. Okay, can the boil to essentials be applied to all types of CR? Many types. One thing to note is that it can't be applied to problems on which the entire point is to work with details, such as draw the conclusion. The point of draw the conclusion is that you're not looking at essentials. And so in draw the conclusion, you actually have to work with details. You have to shape the details almost like you're a smith shaping jewelry or something. But you have to take the details and work with them. But on problems, on other types of problems, on most other types, then this is the point. So this is the point. You need to understand the essential argument and respond to it without getting distracted. So yeah, it's a good point. I mean, the point being that this is pretty much the type of reasoning that you need anyway on most critical reasoning. The statistics just happen to be a lightning rod for this kind of reasoning in the first place, but there you go. One poster says, can you break down options/answers? That's kind of an unfair question. Please ask about a particular option. That question is too general to really answer. How can I do educated guess if I have to? In critical reasoning, it's very difficult to talk about stuff like that. In most critical reasoning problems, there's not going to be a ton of reliable guessing methods. What I will give you is one fact. It's difficult to respond to this question in general because it's mostly intuitive. I mean, there's not going to be a lot of hard rules, but the one thing that I've found is one pretty strong correlation is that on assumption questions, negative statements which means, statements about what is not true or about what didn't happen or etc. are correct more often, are correct proportionately more often. What I mean by proportionally more often is that they are correct answers a higher percentage of the time than they appear. So, that means that they're some sort of preferred answer. I mean, this should make sense because whenever you make an argument, you always do make a whole bunch of assumptions about what won't be true or what won't happen. So, it stands to reason that a lot of assumption questions will have these kinds of things as correct answers. So, therefore, if you need to guess on an assumption question, but only if you need to make a wild guess on an assumption question, then guessing negative statements is a good idea. So notice here that this is a negative statement. The number of production workers was not significantly less than it was last year. In other words, we are ruling out some sort of thing. Again, the poster who put the unfairly general question, that new post is still unfairly general. You're still saying the entire problem and all the choices. I mean, you've got to ask me a more specific question than that. Otherwise, I would have to repeat the entire preceding discussion. So, I mean, please tell me either number one, an answer choice that you would like us to talk about, or number two, what didn't you understand about the previous discussion? Okay. Let's see. Kurt, I'm not sure I'm understanding your question there. Are you asking about me in the study halls, or are you asking about, what, like, does you mean me, or does you mean, like, what? Not really seeing where you're going with that. A couple people are asking about choice B. Choice B is irrelevant because we don't care how many jets are produced. Like, that doesn't factor into the statistics. The statistics are just pounds of waste total versus pounds per worker. So the number of jets is not a relevant statistic here. I mean, still, you're going to go outside the argument, but you still have to stick to the only topics that are at hand here are amount of waste and number of workers, and then amount of waste per worker. So any statistic that doesn't have a bearing on these things is not going to affect the argument. So it doesn't matter how many jets we made. It only matters how much waste was produced by how many people. So, okay. Kurt, I still don't really understand what you're asking me. I mean, these are not quant problems, so it's not like there's going to be some objective amount of detail that's necessary. I mean, if the answer choice is wrong because it's irrelevant to the topic, I generally trust that it'll be enough to say, here's why it's irrelevant. But if you still don't understand why some choice is wrong, then it's best to make an analogy, kind of like this one that we made. Where was it? Here. If you still don't understand the wrong answer choice, I mean, I'm presuming you're asking me something about a level of understanding of wrong answer choices, Kurt. So if not, then I don't really know what you're asking. But if it helps you to understand the choices, if you still don't understand after a certain amount of treatment, the best way to do it is to make an analogy, kind of like this one that we made here. So I hope that helps. Okay. Any other questions about this problem, about specific choices, or about specific issues that you didn't understand? If you have any specific questions, please put them in the text box. Okay. Good stuff. Try this one. Looks like one person is typing. Try this problem. Sarah K is typing. This is if you're typing something, what kind of problem? The diagrams for problems like this. I mean, the T diagrams in the course, they talk a little more about that. But I mean, diagramming is a very subjective thing. Like, diagramming is mostly for problems that you don't understand very well. So if you get the argument, if the argument makes sense to you, then you don't need to make a diagram. But the point of a diagram is to help you either understand or stay on topic. So it's really just when you get confused, you should think a little bit more about diagramming. There's no like objective criteria, I would say. Okay, here's another problem. Give it a shot. Go for it. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please pick an answer if you are one of the people who has not answered yet. Please guess if you have to. Remember that this is a test where you have to answer all the problems in order. So, S. Duta, Mimi, Kathleen, Hema, Jesselyn, and Ish 59. Okay. Let's take a look. Here's your class statistics. Your class statistics are right here. Okay. So, let's take a look. Because postage rates are rising, Home Decorator magazine plans to maximize its profits by reducing by 1/2 the number of issues that it publishes each year. So, half as many issues. So the number of articles per year will not change. So what this basically means is that they are the company is going to send half as many magazines, which will be about twice as big per year. We know they'll be about twice as big because they're saying the number of articles will not change, which means that there will have to be twice as many articles in each magazine. So, well, maybe not twice as physically big, with twice as many articles is the best way to say that. Okay. So, the quality of articles, the number of articles published per year, and so on will not change. And they will have the same subscribers, and they will have the same advertisers. So they will, they figure that they will, so the postage will cost less. Therefore, the conclusion and that the subscriptions will be the same. So the following will not change. The number of subscribers, the subscription price, and the number of advertisers. So the conclusion is that they will have greater profits. Now, the point is that these two things indicate that subscriptions are a complete non-issue. These two. That's a very ugly inclusion symbol. But the number of subscribers and the subscription price are staying exactly the same, which means, among other things, this means that subscribers are a non-factor. Because those things, if you have the same number of people paying the same price, then their profits will not be affected by subscriptions. So you want to weaken, you want to show that the profits are going to decline. So profits are a function of revenue and cost. So we know that their costs are improving. So there's going to be some sort of revenue issue. So the focus of the problem is you want to show that profits will probably go down. There are two ways that this can happen, because profit is revenues minus cost. So profits can go down if revenues go down. or profits can go down if costs go up. The problem is that we know that the costs won't go up. So this won't happen because you have the same number of articles and stuff like that, and you have fewer issues. So this won't happen. You have similar quantities of work and less postage. So we know that we must be looking for some sort of way in which revenues will decrease in order to complete this argument. So with the new postage rate, a typical issue would cost 1/3 more to mail. So let's examine how this would work. So if the postage rates per issue go up, so you have 1 1/3 times the old postage rate, but you only have half as many issues. So 1 1/3 times a half is only 2/3 of your original postage cost. So when they give you specific numbers, I mean, usually math is not the focus, but if they do give you specific numbers, then by all means work with them. So, I mean, the point is that if they give you general numbers, then if they give you general figures that are not numbers, rather, then you want to think more conceptually. But if you get specific numbers, then work with them. So the point is, if you get general concepts like, percent and absolute number without getting specified values, then you want to think conceptually. But, if they hand you specific numbers, then by all means, go ahead and do a couple of quick calculations and see what happens. So you have half as many issues. The postage is 1 1/3 times what it used to be, so this means less postage. So choice A actually works in opposite direction. Like choice A helps the fact that they will make more profit, because choice A proves, mathematically speaking, that they will spend less money on postage. So people who picked A, there were quite a few people who picked A. So if you did pick A, make sure next time if you get specific numbers, make sure you look a little bit at the consequences of those numbers. Revenues going down. The majority of subscribers are less concerned about, well, that's nice, but it doesn't matter what they're concerned about because there will be the same number of them and they will pay the same price. So therefore, they will not affect profits. C, many of them would continue their subscriptions even if the price were increased. Well, again, that's nice, but if you notice the current plan is not to increase the subscription price. In other words, this is not the plan. So a couple of you selected this, but notice that this is not the plan. So we're only talking about what happens if the plan is implemented. So answer choices that don't talk about the plan are not relevant. Like choice C is talking about something else that isn't the plan. I mean, as an analogy, it's kind of like saying, if I lose weight, then I will be better able to run fast. And then having an answer choice that talks about still being able to run fast if I gain weight. Not relevant because the plan is to lose weight, not to gain weight. Like, same thing here, the plan is to keep subscription prices the same. So anything that contradicts that plan is irrelevant. D, same amount of advertising per issue, Well, guess what that means? We only have half as many issues. So this means that our total advertising revenue will be cut in half. Because notice that this is per issue. So like the subscribers are paying the same overall subscription price. So that's not per issue. That's absolute dollars. But these guys are spending as much per issue, but there are only half as many issues. So whoa, buddy, total ad revenue, only half as much as it used to be. So definitely our correct answer here. And then production costs remaining stable would not strengthen or weaken the idea of declining profits because it's a non-variable. Like choice E is saying that nothing changes, so therefore choice E does not swing the argument either way. But again, the point here is to focus on the relatively narrow range of what is in the argument and not to become distracted by other stuff. So the argument's talking about profits. We want to look at ways in which factors that directly affect the profit will change. So if you understand that these are the only ways that you could show declining profits, then you can quickly zero in on the answer. I don't know what EN means, but I come late. This is the first time I hear conceptually. What is conceptually? Conceptually means that you understand the ideas behind something, where you don't have to look at specifics, where you understand general ideas. So you understand the abstract patterns behind what is being presented, as opposed to just running numbers, or as opposed to just looking at particular examples. So, you know, like Minnesota is cold. That's a particular data point. But if you conceptually understand that places that are farther north are cold, then you could figure that out without having to be told. I mean, so that's kind of what conceptual understanding refers to. You have enough abstract understanding that you can figure stuff out pattern-wise. Okay, sure, no problem. Any other questions about this problem? Okay, so what we have other problems lined up, but we're out of time. So I think what we'll do is the next study hall will have a continuation of this topic. But let's do a quick summary of what we've learned today. Super, super quick summary here. Quick summary of today's most important concepts. Number one, make sure you watch out for statistics that don't comport with each other. For instance, a big example is percentages or proportions or ratios versus absolute numbers. But also like per unit rates versus aggregate totals. An example of these would be, an example of per unit rates would be pounds per production worker versus an aggregate total would be something like total pounds. So, and then also the only other major theme of today's lesson was make sure that you boil arguments down to their essentials. You know, like figure out what matters figure out what affects the actual conclusion or line of reasoning in the argument. And then make sure you stay focused on that. So these are our main themes of today's study hall. I think we're going to take the other group of quantitative problems and use them for another study hall. But those are the main deals here. Okay. Good stuff. Can we have one question as a takeaway? What does that mean? I mean, these, oh, you mean like an extra problem? Well, I mean, these problems are all from GMAT Prep. So, I mean, there's lots of GMAT Prep archives floating around the internet. I'm gonna use the problems that are in the rest of. I mean, I had more problems lined up, but there's actually enough to make another study hall out of them. So I think I'm going to hold on to them until that time. But these are, you know, you can find GMAT Prep archives on the internet and stuff. If you want to shoot me a quick email, I could probably send you at least one GMAT Prep archive. You can email me and I'll send you that. Okay. Difficulty levels, who cares? It really doesn't matter at all, especially in the verbal section. But you should just not be thinking about that at all. There's no possible way in which that could help you. So it's important not to think about irrelevant concepts like difficulty level. I mean, you want to just think about the problem and about the stuff that's in the problem. And in critical reasoning, things like difficulty are not well defined at all. Okay, I am going to kill the recording here. I can stay on here with questions a couple more minutes, but